So this is the OnePlus 5, and as you all know, it came out about 7 months ago, and even though it had a bit of a rough start, I think when it came out, it was a really solid phone. But in this video, I want to re-review it and answer the question, is the OnePlus 5 still worth it 7 months later in 2018? So to do that, let's go ahead and get straight into the video and take a look back at the OnePlus 5. So I'm going to do this video by covering each aspect of the phone individually, and then at the end of the video, I'm going to give an overall answer as to whether I think it is still worth it. So first off, I'm sure you guys have heard the specs of this phone about 1,000,000 times by now, but really the specs are one of the main reasons why you would want to buy this phone, because even with that base model, you're still getting a very impressive Snapdragon 835, Adreno 540 GPU which can handle any game you throw at it, and of course 6GB of RAM and 64GB of storage. Now all of these specs are just as good, if not better, than a lot of new flagships that have just come out in the last couple of months. And on top of that, if you really want to go crazy, you can pay a bit more and get 8GB of RAM with 128GB of storage. So clearly specs are definitely one of the strong points of this phone. Now the real question though is, what do all these numbers mean in day-to-day use? Well, it essentially means that performance on this phone is excellent. Everything is super snappy, and even playing the most demanding games on here is a great experience, and really it's easy to forget that at the end of the day you paid half the price of an iPhone X or a Galaxy Note 8. Now the first thing you're going to notice right out of the box is that display, and this phone is rocking a 5.5-inch 1080p AMOLED display, and honestly I think it's actually really good. Blacks are super deep as the screen basically just turns off the pixels, which gives everything great contrast, and as I said, very deep blacks. And it's true that this is only a 16:9 display, so you're not going to get that futuristic vibe from this phone that you'd get from a lot of new flagships, the OnePlus 5T included. In fact, the entire phone feels very plain. You've got your standard aluminum design, which by the way is super slippery, so you might want to get a case for that, and the display has large bezels that take up the top and bottom of the phone, and really the whole thing is just very simple, and whether or not you like that is really your personal preference. I do really like the feel in the hand though, as the sides curve around to the front, which gives it a very smooth feeling, and I also really like having capacitive buttons and the fingerprint sensor on the front of the phone, which in my opinion is a big plus compared to the 5T's on-screen buttons. Speaking of that fingerprint sensor, it is still very fast, and also for the most part it is very accurate. Now going back to that display, even though it is only 1080p, I'm honestly completely fine with that. It's very sharp, and you're going to have a hard time telling the difference between this and a 1440p screen. Also, by going with 1080p, it's going to give you much better battery life, and I think that alone makes it worth it. And speaking of battery life, I've been super impressed with this. I've been able to easily get a full day of heavy usage and even 2 light days if I forget to charge. And I usually average between 5 and 6 hours of screen on time per charge, which is pretty solid. And add to that dash charging, and you've got yourself a phone that's going to do really well battery wise. I can fully charge this phone's 3,300 mAh battery from 0 to 100 in about an hour and a half, and dash charge is definitely one of the major selling points of this phone. Now with all of that being said, let's talk about the cameras, and I honestly enjoy using it, but I also have some mixed feelings here. When you unbox the phone, it becomes clear right away that this phone was really marketed as being not just a good phone, but an excellent camera. On both sides of the box, you've got dual cameras, clear photos printed, and naturally you just expect it to be really good. And in some ways it is, and in some ways it's just okay. On one hand, the shots taken are very sharp with very vibrant colors, and under the right lighting conditions, this thing does take some really solid photos, both with the standard lens and with the very useful 2x zoom lens as well. But on the other hand, I found that when you zoom into your shots and take a closer look, you'll find that these shots are over sharpened, which makes it almost look like a drawing or painting instead of an actual photo. I know this could probably be solved just by a software update or something like that, but we're 7 months in and still nothing, so I would have really liked it if they went for more of a natural look. Also, you're not going to find OIS on here, so videos can be a bit shaky, and finally, low light performance does need some work, but from what I've heard on forums, using Google's own HDR Plus camera app for low light performs significantly better than OnePlus's own camera app, so that's just something else to keep in mind. But overall, the shots do look really nice in the proper lighting conditions on both the 1 and 2 time lenses. And just for the record, I think having a 2 time lens is much more useful than having a low light lens, and I find myself using it almost as much as the standard lens. Now you've also got portrait mode for some bokeh shots and a bunch of manual controls, so you can really take full control of it, which is a very nice touch. I do also really like the design of the camera app, even if it does copy Apple's, and overall I think it is just a good camera. And I think the best way to sum this up is that you're going to get some really good shots. They're just not going to blow you away like the Pixel 2, for example. Now moving on to one of my favorite things about this entire phone, the software. And I feel like OnePlus really nailed it here with a rocking near stock Android, and it comes with no bloatware installed at all, which is especially refreshing after owning an LG G5. They've also added a few very useful features like the dark mode, reading mode, and most importantly the alert slider, and I use all of these on a day-to-day basis, as well as several other things, and after using it for a while, it begins to feel like all of these features should have just existed in Android from the beginning. At the same time, they've managed to keep it simple, and it's a really pretty clean experience. If you're not familiar with OnePlus, you have a widget panel that you can access by swiping to the right, and you can customize this to show certain widgets that you like to use frequently, but I still prefer using Google Now instead, and the only other thing I think it's missing is to let you adjust grid size for icons, which is a big drawback for me personally and ultimately made me switch back to Nova Launcher. Overall though, it's a very clean experience, and I think for most of you guys you'll really enjoy using it. In conclusion, there are lots of little things I like about this, such as the headphone jack, extended screenshot, dash charging, and of course, as I mentioned before, the alert slider. Can't forget that. And when you put everything together like the great battery life and clean software experience, I think you really have a phone that is a really solid option if you're looking for an alternative to the much more expensive Pixel 2, albeit with a worse camera. And even if you take into account the downsides like the big bezels, lack of wireless charging, lack of water resistance, and lack of expandable storage, you still have a good phone even if you are missing those things. I should mention that I was never affected by the weird jelly effect, but if you were, I would just send it back right away, and you should be fine since I never had an issue myself. But if you're looking for a clean Google experience without forking out a lot of cash for a new phone, then you should seriously consider this. Also, weirdly enough, there are still some reasons as to why you might want to get this instead of the 5T as well, such as the 2x zoom lens, which I find to be more useful than a low light lens. So do I still recommend this in 2018? And the answer is yes, but only if you can find a solid deal on it. I got mine from the guys over at Gearbest, so I do want to give a huge thanks to them for originally sending this out for review, but if you'd like to pick one up new from them, I'll make sure to leave a link in the description below as well. Anyway, huge thanks to them again, and I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I really wasn't sure what I would think of this phone when it first came out, but it turns out that I actually like it more than I thought. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.